Well, thank you very much. And you won't be surprised that perhaps my approach is going to be a bit more analytical in terms of this whole question of leadership than Jeremy's bravura performance. Incidentally, Jeremy, if you can repeat the 21st of September 364 times a year, provided it's not a leap year, people like me will be out of a job, which would be pretty good. Now, I want to approach the subject perhaps in a more structural way, thinking about what leadership actually means. And then I will give you a couple of examples taken from my own world. But, ladies and gentlemen, please don't think the military world is in some way unique beyond some Chinese wall where the principles of leadership don't really read across. I've been out of the army nearly 6 years and done quite a bit of this thinking and talking and discussing about leadership, because at the end of the day, if you take a group of people on a common purpose and you've got to put them together, you've got to make a team, the team needs to be led. And whatever walk of life, it seems to me there are principles which read right across. My old life, yours in the commercial world, the sports field, dare I say, politics, and whatever it is, you're pulling people together to form a team. They have a common purpose, and they need to understand and be united in that common purpose. I'm going to touch on 3 or 4 points. They are as follows, just my little trailer here. What's the problem? Where are we? Where do we want to go? And how you analyze that? What courses of action emerge from that analysis? What happens when things go wrong? Because you can't afford to lose, to remember our theme. Failure is not an option. And how you get the team to understand that which it is they must do. So you know where you are, or at least it's a good thing if you do. And you have set out with a team to get from A, where you are, to some mythical B, set for yourselves or set by some outside agency or higher organization, it matters not. And you've got to think about how you're going to do this. There's a very simple analytical tool, 3 monosyllabic English words: ends, ways, means. The ends are your purpose, your objective, what it is you are setting out to attain. The means are what you have to do it. People, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be thinking about this. Money, machines, time is a means. And the art of leadership is the way in which you apply the means to achieve those ends. And so you've got to conduct this analysis, and you will emerge with almost certainly more than one possible course of action. And each course will have its advantages, its disadvantages, and this is where the art of judgment comes in, because sometimes, probably more often than not all of those factors can be quantified. And you've got to make a decision. And sooner or later, that decision has to be made. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my contention that after that decision is made, any further discussion, debate is a complete and nugatory waste of time. For some organizations, after a decision has been made, that debate continues. And I say, I think it's somewhat nugatory myself. I give you that for what it's worth. Part of the analysis will, of course, be considering risk. Sometimes physical risk, almost certainly financial risk, reputational risk, and that all needs to be factored in to the analysis. You then have to, having made your decision, get this plan out to those people, your team, who is going to do it. And that means you've got to be able to communicate with them. And my goodness me, sometimes organizations are not as good as they should be at getting the details down. Some of you, no doubt, work for organizations, perhaps you all do, who have extremely elegant and eloquent mission statements and vision statements and all of that. They have their part to play in communicating what you're about. But basically, can I give you the British Army's own mission? Well, it's a motto more than anything else. A logo, if you like, be the best. It's quite good, isn't it? In fact, I don't think I could improve on it. Be the best. That's not to say we all are, but you aspire. And really, the only performance indicator that matters to the Army is don't come second. Think about it. You can't afford to lose. So, getting the communication done so that each member of the team, the youngest, least experienced, newest arrived, nonetheless understands his or her part and understands that without his or her part, the team is flawed. So then you get that binding together, which motivates the whole to achieve what is required. Can I just, en passant, a word about communication, clarity thereof. I've got many examples. I'm going to give you one here. I think the organization had better be unstated. Some of you might guess. This is a job description in a large public sector organization. Decision support analysis are support staff users of decision support systems who prepare special studies for middle level and senior managers. And it goes on. Who writes this guff? And what does it mean? Because I don't know. Because remember, communication, the art, is to get an idea out of one brain into another or many others as succinctly, lucidly, and clearly as you can. I'm not talking about social communication. That's something quite different. But in terms of doing things, to get that idea across as quickly as you can. So my resting point here is getting that analysis right, getting that plan down, and then inspiring your team members to achieve, because you do not want to lose. And failure is not an option. Very briefly, before I turn to my examples, okay, you've got your plan. Now, difficulty is, somebody is probably trying to rot you up. In my old game, it was the Queen's enemies, who could be a bit sort of difficult at times. Very irritating of them. You, in this room, I suspect, will have, all of you will have commercial competitors who will try and rot you up. So what I'm saying to you is that having adopted your plan, it's very prudent, plan A, it's very prudent to have plan B thought through and ready to go in case the opposition do rot you up. And if you have to adopt plan B, you need to get plan C organized as well, so you remain on the front foot and do not allow yourselves to be put on the back foot. And my last point is probably getting the organization right. Yes, I know what you're thinking. I came from a very structured and hierarchical organization. Indeed, we need to have that to do the things that we do. You, I suspect, most of you are less so. But one sees it time and time again. If there is not clarity about personal responsibilities, boundaries, who is accountable for what, inevitably you're either going to get overlap, or worse, you're going to get a gap, and Sod's law says where there's a gap, things fall through it. So thinking through your structure, however it may be, in whichever walk of life you may be, nonetheless, getting that organization right is really important. Now, my first example, and it's very poignant because we're 30 years on. 1982, the Argentinian junta decide for reasons of their own that it's time to invade the islands we call the Falklands and they call the Malvinas. There was a failure of strategic intelligence on our part, and it happened, as you all know. But the point in time I just want to use as an illustration. is that moment when it was realized not only the Argentinians attempted to take the islands, they had succeeded in doing so. Lenin's great question for the Russian speakers amongst you, "Что делать?" What is to be done? The Whitehall general view was that we've been caught with our trousers down, that's it, we may as well pack up and forget about the islands called the Falklands. That was the general Whitehall view. The then head of the Royal Navy, one Admiral Leach, decides, no, I'm not letting that go, and beards the then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, in the House of Commons, in the presence of the then Defence Secretary, John Nott. And Leach says, Prime Minister, if we do not take action against what has happened, this will be a very different country. Very interesting words. And the rest, as they say, is history. Because despite the misgivings of Mr. Nott, the then Defence Secretary, the Prime Minister agrees to prepare to take military action, and the fleet sails 72 hours later. There, in a very fundamental way, was the courses of action which were open. Basically, do nothing, accept, or go for the status ante quo. And it was a minority view, without a doubt, in Whitehall, but it did prevail, and thank heavens it did. My second example is, again, from the military side of life, and I'm afraid it's personal, so bear with me. Fast forward from 1982 to 1999, the Kosovo War, and I was commanding the ground force sitting in Macedonia, just to the south of Kosovo, awaiting developments as the Milosevic regime was bombed into conceding, and at last it did in early June. So we all said, that's fine, it's taken rather a long time, but so be it. We had some very difficult negotiations with the Serbs to allow the military machines to want to leave, want to come in without too much friction. But in the meantime, Russia was very pissed off. Why was Russia pissed off? Because I don't think we'd treated Russia very well at the end of the Cold War. We'd forgotten Churchill's advice that in victory magnanimity is not a bad idea. We'd cut them out of the negotiations over what to do in Kosovo, and they were pretty pissed off, and they played their joker. Some of you may know what happened, but it was quite simple. They decided to move a small but significant military force ahead of NATO into Kosovo. It wasn't militarily significant, but it certainly was politically. Now, at that point, my NATO boss was an American general, one Wes Clark, known to his own army as the perfumed prince. You can make of that what you will. And dear old Wes hadn't really got himself out of the Cold War. And literally, because he used these words, said to me, this is the race for Berlin all over again, a la 1945. I sort of looked at him and think, I'm not sure he's quite got it all together. And I was directed to be prepared. I never quite got the executive order, but we had to do it. To be prepared either to go to the airfield outside of Pristina in Kosovo ahead of the Russians, and time was very tight to do that, or the Russians having got there, to go there and more or less kick them out. Well, here we go. Analysis. What are the courses of action? Well, the one I've been directed to do seems pretty plonking. What other courses of action were there? To forestall the Russian presence? To remove the Russian presence? When I said, is that by force, General? The answer was a bit muddled. do nothing, or as we all thought, and I'll come back to that in a minute, the wee bit, there's another way of doing this, which is to integrate that Russian contingent, as it had been in Bosnia. And that process of analysis, I wanted to check my own thinking. So I said to my own staff, one's immediate 3 or 4 right-hand men, I said, look, we've got 1 hour. Remember what I said, time is a means. We've got 1 hour to get this right. You go away, do your analysis. I will do it myself. We'll meet in 1 hour's time. Fortunately, we were all in agreement that this was not something which was sensible and indeed arguably was strategically quite dangerous, because you can see where I was coming from, I suspect, that unless one was very careful, either by accident, almost certainly, but possibly by design, we would have dead Russian and dead British soldiers lying around a poxy Balkan airfield, having achieved the square root of fuck all. And a strategically very dangerous position indeed. But at that point, I've been in the service nearly 40 years, and it is part of mother's milk that you follow the directions of your superior officer. And so you can imagine that inside I had a bit of a turmoil going on. But so powerful was that analysis which we had done in its persuasiveness that there was nowhere else to go. And I thought I was within 48 hours of having to write that letter of resignation and receive my P45. It didn't come to it, not least because as these drama unfolded, both Washington and London and Alistair was not a million miles away from all of this at the London end. They were also doing their own analysis and looking at the courses of action, and thank heavens, agreed that the way to do this was to embrace that Russian contingent rather than to go and remove it by force. And that is what we did. How long have I got? 3, right. I've got 3. It's just worth perhaps putting colour on that last example by how one was able to take the sting out of it at local level. I mean, London, Washington, Moscow all had some problems. But of the night we entered, up I go to the airport where this Russian contingent was, thinking I think I'd better go and see them. And a few minutes later, in with the good General Viktor Zavazin, commanding this Russian contingent, in the back of his rather ancient command vehicle. And it was pouring with rain, even though it was a Balkan summer's evening. Probably because it was a Balkan summer's evening. And the rain got into the wiring of this ancient old vehicle, and there was a short circuit. The back fills with black smoke, so we all bail out coughing and spluttering into the rain. And I thought, you know, I've done a few things in my life, but this is perhaps the most bizarre thing I've ever done. So I said, General, you know, generals don't get wet. That's what we do as company commanders. Let's go and take shelter in what was left of the airport terminal after NATO air power had finished with it. And so that was all right, and it was all a bit frosty. And in my map pocket, yes, of course, a map, but also a small, well, not that small, container of that wonderful brown liquid which comes from what is still the northern part of the United Kingdom. Long may it be so. So I said, General, you know, it's bloody cold, it's wet, have some whiskey. And he cheered up hugely at that. So that was Act 1. Act 2, I think it was 2 mornings later, his deputy, I found wandering around my forward headquarters looking rather miserable. And I said, you know, I can't remember his name, Andrew, I think it was. Andrew, what's the matter? He said, we've run out of water. Oh, I said, oh, that's a bit bit unfortunate, thinking, aha. And one of my logisticians, I said, look, the Russians are not very good on their logistic planning. They've run out of water. Send them ours. He said, well, we're a bit tight. Send it. And so there was that. And then Act 3 just shows how you can do things in another way. With the good Zavatin himself, very worried about his personal security and that of his soldiers, because inevitably the Kosovo Liberation Army didn't like Russians very much because they're quite like Serbs. Oh, well, there we are. And anyway, he was worrying about it. I said, I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you an outer security cordon from my own troops. And he cheered up hugely at that. And then I had a little flash of inspiration. I said, furthermore, Victor, we're on Christian names at this point. Furthermore, Victor, these very good soldiers of mine will be commanded by my own son, which was true. At which point, the Russians, being a very sentimental race, tears well into his eyes. And he was a big fella. And he advanced upon me for the bear hug as I sort of danced out of the way, which it just shows there are more ways of killing the cat than banging its head against the wall. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.